Well, hello there. This is Charles the Chess Noob, learning and having fun with chess. Welcome to another episode of Quick Wins number 105. And today I've got a really cool game of the Giraffe Attack, where I get double brilliancies. Let's go take a look. So the Giraffe Attack, a ridiculous name of a slightly ridiculous line. It comes out of the Vienna Game. So starts off, of course, e4, e5, very lovely Vienna, knight c3. Now here, black has to play the Anderssen Defense, which is bishop to c5. Now, it's the Anderssen Defense, named after pre-20th century, so 19th century chess master Adolf Anderssen. He played this quite a lot. And if you look at the article, a link to this video, I've got actually a PGN of every single game that I've been able to find of Anderssen playing the Anderssen Defense. Now this is actually quite a flexible defense against the Vienna. And if you look at the Lee Chess Community database, it's actually the response by black where black has probably the best win-loss ratio against the Vienna. And however, in this position, white has a couple of really good potential responses. So the most accurate moves by white are the knight, the bishop, and potentially sort of the Vienna Gambit-like move as well, f4. However, the best moves, so the most winning moves, are in fact the Vienna Gambit-like move, which is actually a little bit inaccurate, f4, but also this very tricky queen to g4. That is the Giraffe Attack, named by Eric Schiller because he talks about, white puts his neck out. And what's the logic here? Well, here we immediately pressure that weak g7 pawn, asking the question, what is that doing? What is that bishop doing there? Why did you give up the defense? And here, for black to play accurately, they have to play knight to f6. Now, the interesting thing here is that the Giraffe Attack, that's labeled at blue, is one of the best responses by white, one of the highest win likelihood ratios, but black almost never sees it. So if they're an Anderssen Defense player, they get to see this response less than 1% of the time. And a great thing is for us with the white pieces, we've got some quite simple tactics that we can now employ for the attack. Now, firstly, we are attacking the g7 pawn. Now, if black plays the knight, the important thing to realize is that we can't actually capture. The funny thing here is when we look at the historical database, one of the most early games where someone played the Giraffe Attack was actually, I think in 1968 in the Soviet Team Championship. It was Anatoly Karpov who played with the black pieces, who played the Anderssen Defense. His opponent, I think from Georgia, took, and then Karpov effectively just eviscerated his opponent. So you cannot take. Now in this game, one of the most common moves that black will play, second most common move, is they meet this direct threat on their g-pawn by pushing their g-pawn. And it's basically immediately inaccurate. Why is that the case? Well, notice the very weak dark squares now around black's king on the king side. And so we exploit it immediately with white, queen to g3. It's the parking square in these positions. And we're targeting e5, the e-pawn, which comes with a very powerful triple check. Black plays a very natural move. Now here, barely thinking, this was a game of 5-minute blitz, 5+5. It looks like it offends, but our attack here is so strong, we can potentially sack a full piece. So knight here with an attack on that pawn looks like a very natural piece, so it doesn't look particularly unusual looking. Stockfish reckons doing this is potentially good. So the idea here is we attack back here, and we damage black's black's structure. But, you know, I don't really agree that that is the best way to play. You sort of take away some of the potential attacks, but that is technically the most accurate way. I very much prefer this way, focusing on that weak e-pawn. Now, black here decides to play really aggressively, actually. Probably noted that there was something wrong, you know, with their so pushing of the pawns on the king side, but doubles down, tries to take space with f5. Now, that doesn't address this weak e-pawn, and so now we have the first brilliancy. So knight captures the e-pawn on e5. If they take, bang, we've got that very, very powerful absolute triple fork. Now, black recognize that, oh, hold on, I can't take here safely. They have a bit of a think, plays a very natural move, queen to e7, compounding mistake on mistake. Now, this does make sense. You know, they put a second attacker on the knight on e5, but we now have very thematic Vienna game type attack. Queen's knight to d5, attack on the queen, attack on the c7 pawn, and black is in some trouble. They've got nothing better than trading queens, so captures, 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 but at the end of that sequence, knight captures the c-pawn, absolute fork of the king and rook, and we take the rook. And in this position, we've basically come out ahead of the opening in the exchange. So about favoring 1.5, so ostensibly we've won that rook, but it's probably better to think of it as a rook-knight exchange. It's not necessarily strongly better for white because our knight was active, that rook was not. Often we cannot evacuate this knight back out. We should potentially consider it lost, but it gives us a very clear sense of what we need to do next. Their king stuck in the center. So you can no longer castle. This is a little bit weird, a little bit odd. So what we're going to do, we're going to consolidate, develop our pieces, castle our king to safety. And if we're permitted, we try to evacuate our knight. But we don't prioritize evacuating that knight because we lose tempo doing that and we often won't be successful. Anyway, so we leave the knight alone. So firstly, they capture. Here, I develop the bishop. You know, Stockfish reckons d3 is best, but effectively we end up in a very similar sort of position. So here we go. So captures, captures. You know, isolate a pawn here. They decide. So black decided to immediately focus with an attack. But that is premature. I can easily deflect that. The best thing for a black to do is to actually develop their queenside pieces so that they can potentially move their king in for the capture of that knight. So this is actually a mistake. Very simple. Short castles, they've got nothing. And now I have the opportunity for a bit of a counterattack with their king in an exposed place in one of the center files. So check, king moves forward. Now notice the position of the king, this square, critical square c7. Here, bishop, I'm happy to trade. Now, of course, the knight is pinned. Here, the fully open d file, a rook is coming. They move their king, but in doing so, abandon the defense of c7. And in this position, I don't even need to evacuate my knight, but I do it anyway because of emotional damage. Knight to c7, and in this position, black opts to resign. It's a psychological blow. They know that the knight has now, you know, evacuated itself. It's out of its detention, and they lose the will to play on. Good game, GG.